Welcome in to another episode of Cap and Trade. I am your host, Texans Cap. You can follow me on Twitter at Texans Cap, or if you prefer the written form, which we actually did put out a written form this week, capandtrade.substack.com. That's the newsletter location. Put out a post today, so did a quick little evaluation on the trades. I wanted to compare it against the Carolina trade. So if you're interested in reading that, head on over there and hit that subscribe button. But everybody, appreciate everybody hopping in. This will be kind of our cap to the off season. Now that the draft has passed, we got through free agency. We got through the draft. Got through the undrafted free agents, even though those won't be announced until probably next week, based on what I've been told. The team wants to wait for a few things to get sorted out before they announce those. So that's why you haven't seen the Texans announce theirs. Sounds like they've agreed to terms with 9 players. And then Eric Tomlinson was signed today, veteran tight end. So it looks like the team is now at 88 roster spots. So appreciate everybody hopping in. Sam, good to see you. STX, another good night, my man. I'm ready to go. We'll get Mike. He looks much brighter tonight, ready to go, getting himself sorted out over there. But we'll get Mike in here in just a quick second. Got a lot of, a few things to get to tonight. We'll just kind of discuss the draft, how things went, what our perceptions are of everything, and what our expectations are going forward. Just to, kind of put a bow tie on the draft per se. So Truth, welcome in. So let's get our esteemed guest, Mr. Mike Meltser. Good evening, sir.
Cap, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. You look much better this time.
I know. It was one of those simple technological feats of unplug and plug back in.
That'll do it. I am doing good, sir. I'm doing good. I'm kind of relieved to finally get through draft season because it was brutal this year. It was brutal.
It was rough the last few weeks.
It was the longest, especially the last 2 weeks. It was like every day was like 3 days worth and jammed into one day. And so I'm glad it's over with. I'm glad it's done. So the draft. What do you think, man? Just give me the gleaming 30,000 foot view without the weeds. What'd you think?
So they went all in as far as kickstarting the rebuild. The last time a team had the second and third picks was when the Washington Redskins drafted LeVar Arrington and Chris Samuels. I don't know if that's exactly right, but that sounds right to me.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
So I like that they drafted a quarterback because I have been a believer the whole offseason that based on where they were, you kind of like golf, you play the ball where it lies. And even though in an ideal universe, you might be drafting Caleb Williams next season, it would have taken a whole lot to get there, a lot of unknowns. I think Stroud made sense at number 2. I think Anderson was an overpay at 3 as far as the trade goes, even if it was considered just a trade for Stroud. But they vastly upgraded their talent. I don't like how Nick Caserio trades up for nearly every single one of his picks, just because I just haven't seen any evidence of other GMs who do it as frequently as he does. And
not trading up, other teams up and down, but all of his are almost, except for one, all of his, or no, 2 times of the 8 times he moved back. The other ones were all up.
Yes. I would love to know how many GMs consistently move up to draft players they target with the frequency that he does. But it provides a much-needed boost to the city in the sense that there's juice, there's reason to watch the football team. I thought the most measured national article or column about their situation was written by Connor Orr of SI, because he was the guy, because I'm always interested in like the people nationally who understand the pulse of a city. You may not have to live in Houston, but you have to get the pulse of it. And he wrote that he disagreed with how aggressive they were to get Anderson and the cost, but he did acknowledge like that people in Houston have been fed football gruel for the last 2 years. And basically what's happened to the fans between Deshaun Watson, JJ Watt, DeAndre Hopkins before them, it was almost unfair. And so you could see why, from an emotional standpoint, the Texans did what they did last Thursday. So I appreciated that he acknowledged what's been going on, because it's one thing to be a bad team. Like, the Chicago Bears were a bad team, but they had a franchise quarterback play at times very well last season, right? You've got, Arizona had a disappointing season, but they were a more watchable product, I think, on balance in Houston. The Texans were like NFL Siberia the last 2 years. That's the difference. This was a special level of incompetence.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that front too as well. I mean, this is almost kind of twofold. It's getting the team and the roster going in the right direction, but it's also about keeping this this fan base energized. I mean, you hired the fan favorite DeMeco Ryans, had I wouldn't say a stellar free agency, but it was better than the past 2 free agencies. The type of players that they were signing wasn't just scraping the barrel type players. It was more focused type free agent signings. And then you carried that through into the draft. And so all that energy, like you said, all that juice, especially that the fan base is now chomping at the bit. We'll see crowded training camps again. And I'm interested to start to see the attendance at games. I'm not expecting a full stadium again, but I'm certainly not expecting, I mean, you were there with me at the Cleveland game, not expecting a 20 or 30% attendance rate. I think you're going to get a lot of them. Yeah.
That game, I thought had a pretty good atmosphere.
It did. And that one, they had
for
more
different
people
reasons,
just because of the other opposing quarterback on the field. But
yes,
but I think in general, maybe 60, 70%, who knows? But I think you'll see the fans start coming back. And then to get that final batch of fans in there, to get back to that 100% that they were so accustomed to having for so many years, it's just going to take wins.
Yeah, they got to win.
Yes. As simple as that. And I think that's what this draft was. I think this draft was, I normally don't cuss on here, but this was shit or get off the pot. It's been 2 years. We need to see something. And I think that was Casario's reaction was, okay, well, I want my guy. Let's get the quarterback that everybody wants. Let's just jam it out. Yeah, we're going to overpay. Let's get this package done and come out of it with those 2 potential cornerstone players. So I'm with you. I mean, I understand. I don't like the package, but I understand the package and I understand the reasoning for them making those type of moves. And, regardless of the player that you're drafting up for, there's going to be a cost associated moving up from 12 to 2 or 12 to 3,
sure,
regardless if you're coming up for a quarterback or a DN or anybody, any type of player for that matter. But I'm tired of playing the next year game. I'm Caleb Williams. I'm no longer thinking about him. I'm ready to move forward with CJ Stroud and what he can bring to the table, what Bobby Slowick and how he can deploy him and his other assets that he has on offense now, and just get moving forward. I feel like we've been treading water. I feel like the water's been at her mouth for the past 2 years. The whole fan base is just treading water, waiting. Okay, it's time. Let's go. Let's go forward. Let's move forward. I had Brandon Scott on here a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, just use the picks. I'm tired of trading back. Everybody's talking about trade back from 12. Just use the picks. And that's what they did. And they used additional picks. So, so I'm excited from a fan perspective. I'm excited from a analysis standpoint, and I'm excited to get back there on a Sunday and see actual Texans jerseys and not the opposing team's jerseys walking around. But
I mean, barring something unforeseen, Stroud's going to start week 1. You're going to have Anderson obviously start week 1. I'm guessing one of Juice Scruggs or maybe even this Jared Patterson guy. So you're going to have an influx. I'm sure you'll have Tank Dell back there on special teams and or mixed in the slot. And there's going to be people nationally. This is not going to be the draw of like the Chiefs, obviously, but there'll be some intrigue from a NFL Sunday Ticket red zone standpoint on what's going on with the Texans, which has not really been the case since probably early in 2020. There will be reasons to watch this team.
Very much so. I think CJ Stroud's going to be the number one selling point, but I think D'Amico Ryans in general and how this staff manages this roster, I think is going to be a big watching point for national, from a national perspective. And that part just is, like we said, it's exciting for everybody involved. And, speaking of the draft, did you have maybe it's CJ Stroud, but did you have a particular favorite draft pick out of this class that Houston made? Or is it just I'm good with everything, I don't really have a specific player in mind kind of thing? Or
that's a good question. Do I have a favorite pick? It's hard because of the trade up. I do feel, I just have this sense that Anderson's going to work out. And there's something about his energy. They clearly, they seem to rank him as the top overall prospect on the board. And I think they would have taken Bryce if they were number one, but this is a separate deal. I think that Will Anderson was number one. And he just has this sort of magnetic smile, personality, work ethic. Do I worry that he's not quite the athlete that you would typically expect in an edge? He's not Von Miller. That does worry me, but I just kind of have this sense that this is going to work. Don't like the price. I do like the player. What else? I mean, the other ones I thought were fairly solid across the board. I obviously wanted them to draft a quarterback to kind of start that cycle. I thought Hutchinson made a lot of sense in the 6th round. And this is classic Mike Meltser nerdiness. My favorite Nick Caserio move, even though some people didn't like it, is I like trading the 4th round pick for the 3rd round next year, the 3rd rounder. Yes. Because that's, you think about that, I think the part
that's a bid on variance, and
yes,
you win more often than you realize.
Yes. And what people I think haven't fully pointed out is they gave up a 4th round pick. They gave up a pick of a player that could have contributed, to their football team, because they only had then the 1 4th rounder, Dilton Horton. You draft guys in the 4th round. I'm not saying they're locks. They're far from it. They're probably, I would guess the numbers are probably 15 to 20% to hit somewhere probably around that general range. But you can draft players in round 4, especially with this roster, who can contribute. Yeah. They sacrificed that despite all the other moves to then get a 3rd round pick next year. And I think basically complete, have the full, more or less complement of picks. Now, some will say, oh, you might be only moving up 10 spots next year because the Eagles are going to be very, very good. That's a real possibility. But like the Laramie Tunsil deal, or more appropriately, like the Russell Wilson or the Jamal Adams trade, even if a team
even
is
the Watson
good,
trade, I mean,
the Watson trade, you don't know what's going to happen. The Eagles might be the best run organization in football. If Jalen Hurts, God forbid, tears his ACL in week 3, that pick might be 12th in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
And that's part of what you're paying for, which goes to what you said. When teams make trades like that historically, a discounted pick, I give you my 5 this year for your 4 next year. In this case, I give you my 4 now for your 3 later. Statistically, that tends to work out, and you typically get a higher pick. And I'm not even including the fact that this was a relatively weak draft. There's a real chance that next year's draft is just better with more depth and more talented players.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm all for that type of trade. The one that was interesting, and it was the trade back with Philadelphia. It felt like the team was trading with Philadelphia all weekend.
Yes.
When they moved back from the 6th round, I think it was pick 191, and got 2 7ths. And then Philly flips that for a 5th rounder in 2024. So he takes 2 7ths and turns them into a 5th in 2024. I was like,
Yeah, that was a good job by Howie. Yeah. So I guess the Texans could have done something like that.
It's just timing. It's hard to say that they could have done the same thing. It's just timing and the way the board fell. I just thought it was interesting. I saw that, and then I saw that trade. I was like, wait a minute, that was a pick we traded. But no, it's if I had a favorite pick on my side, it's gonna be Tank Dell. I'm with you on Will Anderson. I mean, shoot, go watch the Houston Texans video that they posted and look at how Caserio greets Will Anderson. I mean, like it's his lost son that he's never seen before. And I sent it to a friend of mine. I said, find somebody that loves you as much as Nick Caserio loves Will Anderson.
Oh yeah.
And there, yeah, he was clearly outside of Bryce Anderson. He was clearly top of their board, and he's been at the top of their board for a long time. And so, but Tank Dell, I think, and way I've been kind of describing him personally, and this may be way off base, is he's kind of like a positionless player for this offense. He can line up at running back and split out at the last second. He can line up in the slot. He can maybe find a mismatch and get a linebacker to follow him out to the outer boundary. It's going to be all about mismatches for him when he's on the field. Like, where can we stash him that's going to get a nickel cornerback or a linebacker or outside, somebody that has no business covering him whatsoever? How can we find a way to get him that mismatch, and how can we create space around him to let him make a move once he gets the ball in his hands? Whether it's jet sweeps, short routes, I mean, just whatever. That's kind of like, I'm really excited to see the imagination that Slowick can come up with to utilize him. I mean, he's not big like Deebo Samuel was or anything like that, and I'm not trying to make that comparison, but I just think how they utilize Samuel, similar to that, just all over the place. He's not designated to one position. He's just kind of like your offensive weapon type position. So, and then I think there might be a case to have him returning punts as well. So I know they did some of that with him when they did the local workout day with him. So that one I'm really excited about. And then you mentioned Patterson earlier, and that was really I'm really intrigued about how that whole interior offensive line shakes out. And I'm starting to get a little, I don't know if concern is the right word, but I'm getting a little peaked entrance of the Shaq Mason situation. Like,
how so?
And maybe it's just me, and they tabled extension talks, and they said, hey, we'll talk about this over the summer, and maybe they get an extension done over the summer. But if an extension doesn't get done, and he's only got 1 year left on his deal, and that was, I mean, they traded day 3 picks, so it's not a really big asset loss there. But it just, Patterson, he was a center. Juice played guard and center, and it's almost kind of like, let's just find the best combination of this group of players and how they fit onto the offensive line, and whether that ends up with Scruggs as guard and Patterson as center, or Mason as guard and Scruggs as center, whatever. And I'm sure it'll probably shake out with Scruggs in the center, Mason, Green, and Tunsil and Howard, and then you have Heck and Patterson as your swing guys. But I do like it. I'm a little intrigued with Mason now and how this plays out and what the expectations were with the interior line, because that was clearly one of the worst pieces of this offense. So you see, like, Ben Baldwin will put out his little offensive line rankings, and and it does it by position. It'll have like tackles, guards, and center, and it's on a 0 to 100 scale. And the tackles is like 91, and then the center and the guards are like 12. It's just like just absolutely horrible. And they end up being like an averaged out, like medium, middle of the pack, slightly back, bottom third of the pack offensive line. So I think putting those out, kind of asset allocation there, bringing in Matt Mason on the trade, drafting the 2 interior players, hoping Green can find his way back, just gives me hope that, I'm not expecting a top 5 offensive line. I just want a functional offensive line where Stroud can actually learn and not just get body slammed every other week.
Yeah, I'm always curious to see who's versatile to do what. Like, you look at drafting both Scruggs and Patterson. We've seen this before in the NFL where a team double dips on a position, and then oddly enough, the guy who's later drafted somehow outplays the earlier drafted player. Who knows if that happens here, but I kind of wonder between those two guys, if Nick Caserio had to pick one who might be more versatile, like who could play guard. I wonder who that might be. Because, as you mentioned, they need a lot of help on the interior. Green's got to get a lot better. That's big for the long term of the franchise. Shaq Mason needs to plug in and play well. And then you also want to have some depth there. Like, I have no belief in Scott Quesenberry Morrissey, who the hell knows? Like who's like the top backup guard right now on this team? Who would that be?
They have like a million centers right now.
Yeah, a lot of centers.
Yeah. So right now it's the coolest name ever. Dylan Deathridge, undrafted. Tyler Beach, undrafted. And then they've got, so really, if you count Jimmy Morrissey, Michael Dieter, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs, and Questenberry all as centers, then you have 9 offensive linemen, but 4 of them are guards. And 2 of them are undrafted. So there's going to be, I don't know. It's going to be interesting how that all shakes out. I feel like it's, a Juice Scruggs and then Patterson is kind of like your swing guy between guards and center. And then I don't see Jimmy Morrissey or Michael Dieter making this roster unless something just changes during camp.
I would tend to agree.
But yeah, I mean, that's probably still one of their lightest group or position group is the guards at the moment. But like you said, there is a little versatility between Scruggs and Patterson and both of them having experience at both guard and center and having good experience and good performances at both positions. It wasn't just a horrible at one and good at the other. So I think that is something just had to keep an eye on. Maybe that's something where they settle in on another guard once they get into camp, or injuries happen. I mean, it's way too early, but that's going to be probably one of the main positions to watch for and once camp gets going. So we talked about the trades. I wanted to add, and I know your answer on this, but is Nick a good negotiator? I had this question written down.
No,
I don't know the answer to that, but it doesn't seem like it. He seems to overpay more often than not. I mean, looking back at all the day 3 weird trades he made his first year, that guys that never even saw the roster a week later with like Anthony Miller and
yeah, that was a debacle.
And the cornerback from Holman from Green Bay, and then
and
then Brandon Allen from Cincinnati, like divvying up these 6-round picks for guys, and then they're gone.
Marcus Cannon, God,
yeah. So I don't know if he just gets a little amped up and is like wants to get it done, and who knows? I don't know.
Well,
but it's some of the trades this weekend, and I know some people don't like the trade charts that I post, and I get that. Some of them had good even value, some of them didn't. So it's kind of hit and miss.
I don't know how much you negotiate in your job. I do, obviously, a decent amount in mine, but I'm always thinking about like the trade that you see is the one that they ended up at. So what I'm always wondering is what exactly did, let's say, Arizona ask for that you were unwilling to give? You know what I mean? Like typically, sides are like, let me get this right here in negotiation when they start and they kind of like move to the middle, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always wondering like if this is
where they ended up at
is number 12, number 33, the first round pick in 2024, the third round pick. Where were we here exactly? Like, what was that?
Yeah.
Like what did they ask for? Did they ask for like 3 first round picks, for however you want to put it, Stroud or Anderson, the combination to guarantee both of them? I'm always wondering about that. Like, what was the first ask Arizona had? I'm also wondering, part of bad negotiating would be if you make an offer that the other team can't refuse. Like, I imagine however Bill O'Brien negotiated the Laramie Tunsil deal, it's like if I'm Chris Greer, Miami's GM, and somebody calls me and says, hey, I'm going to give you 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and whatever else is going on in that deal, I might think to myself, like, yeah, maybe I can negotiate for more, but I might not want to push my luck here. Like, let me just take this. So does Nick open, because I know there's the whole story about how, like, they were down to the last, like, minute 30 with Arizona. I tend to think that deal, especially based on Daniel Jeremiah's mock the night before, they had discussions about the parameters of that deal.
I think the framework was more or less in place, and then just maybe Arizona said, hey, if we're going to get this done, then I need this because I can't get my guy or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I wonder about that. And then the last part about Nick as a negotiator is, this is what I always wonder about, and I don't know the answer. This is the kind of thing you may never know the answer. if you gave up the Cleveland one versus the Houston one, and I know that you and I might value those picks differently, but I had McClain on my satellite radio show Saturday, and I asked him, was that a preference or a concession? And he said, no, Mike, that was a concession by them, but by the Texans to give up their first rounder. Now, I don't know if McClain's right, but that's what he's reporting, or what he told me on the radio Saturday. What I'm wondering is, and it depends on the valuation you have on those picks, but like, let's say for the sake of the discussion that you and I valued the Cleveland pick, the Houston pick higher because there's a better chance it is up in the draft order.
Right.
If you offer Arizona and Monty Osenfort Cleveland's first round pick, 12-33 in the third rounder, like, are they going to say no to that deal because it's the difference between the Cleveland pick and the Houston pick? That's what I always wonder about. Like, is that going to be the difference for them to say, nope, we're going to reject your trade and then stay at 3 and then do what? Pick Will Anderson themselves? Maybe.
Yeah.
That's like what I wonder about. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. They wanted
Paris John. It's interesting, and the calculus on that is very difficult to ascertain from their perspective. And it seemed like, yeah, I mean, at first glance, you would, by most people, and I don't want to get my team blinders on, but just at first glance, yeah, you would think maybe the Cleveland pick's going to be worse off than Houston's pick. And then you see all the odds and everybody's like, Arizona's got the first 2 picks next year. Yes. But that is an interesting discussion because it does make you wonder if Arizona just kind of maybe just eked out a little bit more from Caserio at the end. You know, like they had the framework done. Maybe. Made the Stroud pick. Started, you know, then other teams maybe backed out at number 3. We've seen some of the reports. And Arizona, maybe they threatened with Will Anderson. Who knows? Because
they could have.
You know, Seattle was going to take Anderson. They were going to take Anderson or Witherspoon, whoever was there. And I think Anderson would have been their first choice. Indianapolis was locked in on Richardson. And so there was no way that they could let this go and then think, well, we can trade up to 7 or 8 and get him. No, this was their only shot at getting Will Anderson. And so maybe Austin Fort's on the other line is like, look, if you want him, this is what you're going to have to pay. And if not, then I'm going to draft him. And maybe he turns around and drafts Paris Johnson anyway. But, you know, that's just the way these negotiations go. And he really, really, really wanted him and kind of paid through the nose on it. So I would love to be a fly on the wall in that type of negotiation and see, like, at what point is, you know, like, and it's coming down to the last minute, like he's reporting. So does it get into a bind? Like, look, we got 60 seconds on the clock here, man. We need to get this done. And yeah, fine. Just take our first instead of Cleveland's first. Let's get to, you know, maybe that's the way it goes down. I don't know, but it is interesting to see how valued. I think those 2 picks are going to be fairly close. I think Cleveland's coming for a regression. I'm not entirely convinced Watson's ever going to make it back to where he was. Maybe he does, but playing in Cleveland is definitely not good for him from a weather aspect and conditions and things like that. And so I feel like there's a good chance that those picks could probably end up within like 5 slots of each other next year.
Yeah, I mean, they both could be high picks. It's just, you know, it's nerve-wracking because Texans over-under is set at 5.5. They won 3 games last year, tied the other. Mm-hmm. And once you get past, like, you know, this is going to be obvious commentary, but winning and losing is very binary. It's like you can't win like 80% of a game, right? Yeah. Like you either win or you lose, or I guess you tie. And so the Texans could like play decently well this season, whatever that might mean to you, and then win like 6 games. Like that's actually possible. You know what I mean? Because like you face some tougher teams, and I actually think the last place schedule is overrated because the 2 teams you play based on last place are the Jets on the road and Denver, I think, at home. And both teams, I think, should be substantially improved from this past season for different reasons. But you do play the NFC South. But the point is that, like, D'Amico can coach well. You can play much better, but you could win 6 games and give up, let's say, I don't know what that would be, Cap, but let's say the 7th, 6th, 8th pick in the draft, which is a high cost, you know, based on what they gave up or traded for.
Yeah, but it's not number 2 overall. And I just don't,
Yes.
I mean, the football gods has got to give us a little leeway at some point. You can't have
I like
a top
you
3 pick,
referencing the football gods. Yes.
Top 3 pick 3 years in a row. It just no, no. And that would have to just be something tragic happen for Houston. So, and at the end of the day, and Beige makes a good point. I mean, he really wanted Anderson, and Arizona utilized that to their advantage and was able to get additional assets. And Houston's comfortable with that, and I get it, and I'm fine with it from that perspective. If that's what you want to do, and that's the price you're paying. You still have another first rounder next year. You still have some. Now we're back to the normal draft capital. No more abundance of picks anymore. Now we're back to the normal 8. I think they have 8 picks next year. So,
because the one thing I do want to point out is that in Houston in the last 10 years, I think you have to say that the best trades that have been made by Houston sports organizations have been made because what the value they gave up was really not all that much. And I'll point to a couple of specific deals.
Okay.
So when the Astros trade for Justin Verlander, now we didn't know how it would turn out, but the 3 prospects they gave up, even at the time, was kind of like, hey, this is a pretty fair price to pay. They're all busts. It looks even better. You got Justin Verlander, right? They wouldn't have won the World Series or the American League without Justin Verlander, period. They got the player. But if they had traded Kyle Tucker for Justin Verlander, it would have been a worse trade, right? It would have been a worse trade because you give up more for the guy. And then even though he would have helped you the way he did, you would have arguably not have won the World Series last year or gotten there the year before. It would have been a worse trade just by paying more. The James Harden deal, 11 years ago. Daryl Morey makes that deal. A legendary trade in the history of the NBA. Rockets don't give up a whole lot for him. If Daryl had given up 2 or 3 extra first-round picks for James Harden, it still would have been a fair trade, but it would have been an objectively worse trade because you wouldn't have those assets. In any league, even in baseball where there's no salary cap, every asset you have in a capped sport is precious because you can't easily replace it. And the other example, going back to Houston and going back to the Texans, so the Texans gave up, I'll say, 150 cents on the dollar to get Laramie Tunsil, who has been, when he's on the field the last 3 years, has been a premier left tackle. Yep. So I think what Nick Caserio did is he walked into like a Lexus dealership and he paid, I don't know what they cost. I'm not that rich, but let's say they cost 100 or whatever.
Right.
He paid like 150 for a $100,000 car. Now you can do that once in a while if you got money, but if you keep doing that, you're not going to really be financially solvent. Meanwhile, the 49ers trade a 5th round pick and a 2nd round pick for Trent Williams. And they do it, I want to say, the same off season, or they do it a year later, right? Let me get the trade terms exactly correct here.
Yeah,
they got
him cheap.
A 3rd and a 5th.
Yeah.
So San Francisco trades for a guy who is as good or better or a little worse than Laramie Tunsil, but they give up way less to do it. Yep. These kind of things matter in a salary cap sport. It's not a criticism of Laramie Tunsil, or in this case, Will Anderson. It's just to say value means a lot because at the end of the day, even if CJ Stroud is great, even if Will Anderson is great, let's just take that and assume it for the sake of argument. To win a Super Bowl or to win the AFC, you're going to have to find players. Nick Caserio or whoever is going to have to find players in rounds 2, 3, 4, 5 who are cheap and who are good. See the last million teams that have won Super Bowls.
Yep.
That's the way I think about value in trades.
Yep. Yeah. And Trent Williams is way older. Yeah, he was. And it's worth saying that those were 2 completely different situations. Trent Williams wanted out of Washington. He was going to get out of Washington. He literally forced his way out because he wouldn't even put his helmet on because he played the card that something wasn't right, and then got to San Francisco and the helmet just fit just fine. But, and you see same thing here. They're talking about 49ers trading 3 first for Trey Lance. The thing about
that's been a bad trade.
It has been a bad trade, but the 49ers keep winning.
Yes.
That's where they get the cachet to be able to do that kind of stuff and it be kind of overlooked. And then Houston does something similar and they just get drug in the media the past 3 days. And I mean, I've tried to put my spin on it as well, and a lot of people in Houston have put their spin on it as well. But the national media is not going to see it that way. They see it as you could have traded. I mean, you could have drafted C.J. Stroud and taken Van Ness or somebody else as another edge at 12 and kept your 33 in your future one. So, yeah, they traded all that capital for Will Anderson. And, hey, that's just what Houston did. And we'll have to wait and see if it's worth value. I just don't know that Will Anderson could ever play at a level that the national media of the ones who were raking the team over the coals would come back in 3 years and go, yeah, it was worth it. That was worth it.
Well, it's also one of those things, Cap, where famously Bill Belichick advised Thomas Dimitroff not to give up all those picks for Julio Jones. Mm-hmm. And Bill Belichick ends up being wrong and Thomas Dimitroff ends up being right. And I think this actually makes sense when you think about it. Thomas Dimitroff made the right trade in moving up and getting Julio Jones, but it still cost the Falcons because they didn't have those extra picks to use, if that makes sense. Like, you can still get the great player and it can still hurt your team, not like from a bottom line standpoint, but just it can hurt your team by trading for somebody or trading up for somebody who's really good, but losing a lot of assets, even if that player is good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, maybe the calculus is like we said, you still have the other first, and that's part of the calculus in the whole situation. And maybe
it's probably
might be a little bit different. Yeah, it might be a little bit different situation if they did not have the extra first. Maybe they don't make that move. But I think in the grand scheme of things, looking at the package deal where you're getting C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson, knowing the team still has a first, knowing the team still has a second next year, then maybe it's worth it from that perspective. I mean, they still even have the third next year that they got from Philadelphia. So they still have 8 picks next year. There's no 6-rounder. So, I mean, they got 1, 2, 3, and 2 4s. So they still have 5 picks in the first 4 rounds as of now for next year. So,
yes,
I imagine all of that played into the calculus of that trade. But it was interesting though. You take out the trades and stuff, and you look at draft grades are what they are. I get that. It's more or less just a click kind of thing. But I see more often than not that Houston received good draft grades. And I think a lot of those, like Dane Brugler, he's not including the trade made or anything like that. He's just basing that on the players drafted, not where they're drafted, not what slot, just who did they draft. And I think a lot of the same evaluators are looking at it the same way. So a lot of them came back and said, Houston had a very good draft, not including how they got there, but they came out with a very good draft. And so I think Scruggs kind of surprised a lot of people going that early, but same conversely, Hutchinson, I think a lot of people didn't envision him going that late in the draft. So I'm really excited for the team. I'm really excited going forward. I feel like the arrow's finally starting to point back up. It's no more dreading another season. There's finally some excitement. So
you're looking forward to this one. Yes.
Yeah. So what for 2023 on a record standpoint, what would you consider a successful year for Houston?
I would say 7 wins. 7 wins.
Okay.
You get to 7, which is at least 3 more than you've had in each of the last 3 seasons. I think that would be a success because at that point you'd probably be beating, 1 or 2 decent teams. Hopefully Stroud, Anderson stay healthy at their respective positions. I would say right around 7. 7. This is unlikely, but 7 is 7 wins, depending on the order they come, could have you playing actually meaningful football games in December. I would say that's more unlikely with this team, but if you get to 7, that would be a success for me.
Yeah, so if they had 7 wins, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6. That puts you around pick 7, depending. There's probably going to be some tiebreakers and stuff. So yeah, I'm a little more bullish. I'm more in the 8 win would be more of a success for me. 7, I would be happy with. Anything below 7, I would be quite disappointed, absent that there's not some major injury or something that affects the team that they just can't get past. But I think just not only from the wins, is there any I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate this kind of answer. Like, what do we want to see from this organization? Not from the number of wins, which we've said is 7-8, but just from product on the field, functioning as a normal organization. I think last year, I think Lovie Smith kind of righted the ship from an actual normal functioning type of organization on and off the field. It got a little cagey, midway through the season and towards the end. But, he started getting a little spicy with media and things like that. And so what do you want to see from this team on the field, off the field going forward as to also be considered successful? If there's a way to answer that. I'm trying to think.
Well, if we start with the offense, you want to see Bobby Slowick be the next Mike McDaniel or Kevin O'Connell, Mike LaFleur, or Matt LaFleur, I should say. I flipped them. Yeah, more Matt than Mike, I suppose. And just have it, see some of the elements of the 49ers offense that you've seen with the running game, with the scheme, with what they do. The passing game looks just naturally easier. That's something I'm big on. Is my favorite offenses in football are the ones where it doesn't seem like they're working that hard. It seems like it's easy. The execution's on point.
That's a great way to put it. I love that.
Yeah, that's why my favorite offense of all time was the Greatest Show on Turf Rams. Like, I love that team. They had great players at running back, receiver, quarterback. Like, it was just perfect. Good offensive line. It just looked so pretty. So I'm biased towards those kind of offenses more than just pure smash mouth. But I have an appreciation for that too. So it's at the line of scrimmage, play action. Can you get defenses sort of off balance? Can you create plays in the passing game? Because for this offense to be even average, Slowick is going to have to do some really yeoman's work here, especially getting these receivers open, which is, I neglected to say this about 20, 30 minutes ago, but I don't think it's too much to say, hey, Tank Dell is the kind of athlete with explosive ability that you want to get on the field for this team, even in week one, assuming that he's healthy, because you want to present that threat to a defense. So I want to see, pass protection, develop the running game beyond just Dameon Pierce breaking tackles, but develop a running game that's also based on scheme and guys fitting that scheme and executing properly. Not just, hey, my running back broke 5 tackles and he gained 25 yards, but something to where
it's more difficult yards.
Yeah, not difficult yards, schemed up yards. And then defensively, this is where it can get interesting because really you're looking for the DeMeco Ryans effect. What is that? You talk about swarm mentality. How exactly is that? How is that manifested here? Is that, the linebacking core has, I think, a lot of question marks. You do have interesting possibilities on the pass rush between Anderson, Bernard, Malik Collins on the inside, Rankins to an extent. Can they generate pressure on the quarterback, not always blitzing? And then ultimately, if things are answered, or if questions are answered in the right way, the secondary could be pretty good. Stingley stays healthy. Petrie takes a jump. Ward is a seamless fit inside. Nelson maintains his play. You could actually have a pretty viable secondary. So I'm really eager to see what DeMeco's imprint is defensively, what that looks like.
Yeah, we saw it a complete opposite of what we wanted to see last year. A bunch of zone, Tampa 2, very low blitz rate. He kind of upped it towards the back half of the season, but I want to see some creativity, not just vanilla football and expect execution to take over. At some point, you've got to scheme up ability to stop the ball and not just rely strictly on execution and playmaking, because this roster's still not there to be able to do that. And the offensive side, like you said, I think I just want to see more than a yard and a half on first down and then be second and long and then running the ball again or something, and just not wanting to get mad at this offense with the way they manage second down and third down. I just want to hopefully see some more productive, like they say, stay on schedule, getting 3 or 4 yards first down, on the first down, and then be able to maintain that schedule going forward and not go backwards. And speaking of Dameon Pierce, we'll kind of get off of this for a second. Were you surprised they didn't draft a running back? I was kind of surprised.
Not tremendously. Maybe a little bit. I mean, they signed Singletary, who I think is a pretty good backup running back.
Yep.
For some reason, they signed Mike Boone on day one of free agency, which I can't
that
really
was
figure
wild.
out.
That was the Eric Murray deal. Was like,
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Who was bidding for Mike Boone? And I know it was a low-level contract and low guarantees, but I mean, that was wild. But
yeah. So if you ask me like before the draft, would I have, if I had to bet on it, would they draft a running back? I would say, yeah, sure. I think so. I'm going to pull up the draft tracker real quick as we talk, because I want to look at just the running backs taken, because there are always a lot of different, options, and even players who went undrafted. I thought at running back, there were some useful ones. I'm a little biased,
and they picked up one. Yeah.
They did in Validate. Sean Tucker from Syracuse is a good player. I know he had some injury questions, but that guy was a very productive college player. I like Deuce Vaughn, who was picked in round 6. Everybody's seen that, obviously. McIntosh was a key part of Georgia's running game the last couple of years. So there are a lot of different places to go at running back if they wanted to. So I guess I'm a little surprised, but it's not like a massive deal to me.
Okay. Yeah. I was really looking for a day 2, early day 3 kind of 1A, 1B with Pierce. And then, because Stingley's only on a 1-year deal, but, I feel like they could probably find another running back if they needed to somewhere along the line during camp, during last cut downs, things like that. But if hopefully Validate can show a little bit of juice and get up there and maybe make a shot at getting onto this roster, because it's going to be very tight. We really don't have any history on D'Amico and how he carries his roster. I'd have to go back and look at San Francisco and see how many running backs they carried. But, obviously it's going to be Damian Pierce and Singletary. And then from there, it's Ogunbowale, Boone, Gerard Dokes, and Validate. And then I don't know if Beck is going to be considered a fullback or a tight end, and, what that means for Troy Hairston. So I don't know if this is a team that's going to carry 4 running backs and a fullback, or 3 running backs and a fullback. I guess it also depends on special teams, which, if you're not running back 1A, and you're a running back on this team, you're going to be expected to have some special team skills. So be interesting to see how that plays out, because Ogunbowale was very good on special teams. I have no clue if Boone has any special teams works. Dokes did a little special teams, and then we'll obviously have to wait and see with Validate. But that's still,
what Validate signed for?
Yeah.
I'm curious how much guaranteed money he got. I had not seen that.
It's 175. He got a pretty big guarantee. Says $30,000 signing bonus, 145 P5 guarantee, so 175 total. That was probably the 10th highest ish.
Well, based on that, it seems like he has a good shot of making the team.
Yeah, I mean, I've always viewed those guarantees on those undrafted guys as prepayments for practice squad.
Yeah,
because they have offsets. So if he doesn't make the roster, and he's going to be making $216,000 for the year on practice squad, the first 14 weeks are already paid in that guarantee they gave him, because it's offset by that.
So then he wouldn't get any actual money.
No.
Okay.
No.
See, I should know this because
I don't know the actual functionality of like when he's actually paid on a salary guarantee, but
sure.
I believe if I looked at a few other contracts, there's a paragraph in there that if they're released, this guarantee would be paid in line with whatever the CBA says, and it's a certain timeline. So it'd probably get mixed in with his weekly paychecks, but at the end of the day, 85% of his practice squad salary has already essentially been paid.
Got it.
So let me get the undrafted signal.
Yeah, I think.
Here, I
mean, it's not. It's not what I would call a strong running back core relative to the league. Like you compared them and ranked all 32, but it's much more. It's about as viable as they've had it in the last probably 4 to 5 years. You have a solid starting running back, you have a viable second running back, and then you have options with the third back, the scat back between Boone, who they obviously like to an extent, Agumbawale, who has some value, and then Valladay, who is probably who most fans would want to see get that because there's more promise with a rookie like that. So it's a viable running back core.
Let's see. I wanted to see how this was gonna. Whoop. Nope.
You could mostly see it. It's just not zoomed in. They let you zoom in on this.
No, the screen is not big.
Oh, it's not like they don't like formulate
it
properly.
I've been messing around with the layouts on here, and I need to go back and fix this. So we'll.
Oh, there you go. That last one looked pretty good, actually. Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Even
I'll
if you
have to go back and play. I'll have to go back and play with them. So if you're looking at this, I apologize for this size. I need to go back and fix this. So when you see all the reporters, the Aaron Wilsons, the Tom Peleceros, when they're starting spouting off undrafted free agents and what their guarantees, they're looking at this piece. This is the document they're looking at. Luckily I have some access to this stuff as well. So go down here to Houston. There's only 3 of them on here, and they signed a 9 or I've agreed to terms. So Valladay, $30,000 signing bonus, 145 base guarantee, so 175 total. Killen, the offensive lineman, he got 180, so he got a little bit more. And then the defensive end Gay got 80 total. So what to see? I think Andre Carter with Minnesota.
Yeah, he got a lot.
I think he is number leader in the clubhouse. Yeah, 340 right here. I'm surprised. Like, I remember doing mock drafts on PFF like back in early April, and Andre Carter would always show up around the 3rd round, and just the fact that he went undrafted, that's pretty wild. So there's a 226, 236, 230.
Yeah, that was a weird one. Yeah. I remember when Andre Carter's dad was a 1st-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
That made me feel old.
Yeah, that would make me feel old. That's weird. So just to give you all a quick lesson. So signing bonuses, there's a pool that each team, I haven't received the memo. Last year it was 167,000 and change. I'd imagine it's probably like 172 or something like that. So each team has a pool of sign-in bonus money that they can use on undrafted free agents, and they can't go beyond that. So they can use up to $170,000 spread out over their players and sign-in bonus money. There is no cap on base guarantees. So that's why you're starting to see teams really put a lot of money towards base guarantees, where some of these players like Valladay is getting more guaranteed than a 7th round pick. So, it's kind of more than Brandon Hill. I think Brandon Hill, the 7th round pick for Houston, the safety, and his signing bonus was like $76,000 with no base guarantees. So Valladay actually has more guarantees than him, and he was undrafted. So
it's almost like you'd, other than the pride factor and the history of it, it's almost like you'd rather financially be undrafted as opposed to be a 7th round pick, which then makes you kind of wonder how teams are going to start to value that sort of thing as well.
Yeah. And another thing about being an undrafted free agent is you can sign a new deal after 2 years, whereas
that's a big deal.
Whereas a drafted player is 3 years. So
yeah.
I mean, if you're undrafted and you just somehow just light up a fire and end up becoming a starter in year 2 or something, like, kind of like Philip Lindsay was on that track there for a little bit with Denver. There's an opportunity for them to get paid very, very early in their career. So that's something else to consider. I mean, literally, from my understanding, teams are starting to call players in the 6th and 7th round. They're like, hey, if you're not drafted, we want to sign you. If you're not drafted, we want to sign you. And it's like total mayhem for like soon as pick 259 is announced. Woo, those phones are going, and it is full on chaos for about 24 hours with undrafted. And And I saw a couple tweets from a couple of agents. They're like, you basically just have to take the offer that you get because it may not be there 5 minutes later.
Sure.
Which is just wild to me.
That must be a fascinating little like couple hour period for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, you're just like, especially if you're an agent that's got 3 or 4 guys and you're trying to and it's not like you can tell them, you're like, yeah, I mean, you basically have to tell your client like, hey, if we get a phone call and it's this, then I'm just gonna have to tell them yes, because if we tell them, let me check with my client and get back with you, it's not going to be there when I call back. And so that part's always been fascinating to me. And I saw some tweets about extending the draft. No, thank you. I think 7 rounds.
Yeah, that would surprise me.
But yeah, I mean, that part, it would be that. I mean, that whole stuff just fascinates me altogether. So let's see if we got any questions from the crowd. You got any questions, comments? Throw them up. I hadn't had a chance to go back and kind of star some of the stuff, but let's see here. Yeah, and Deathridge, that was quite possibly one of the coolest names. So we had Deathridge,
it's a good name,
Tank, and Juice. So if there was just a name draft, then Houston probably won that for sure. Moker, can we trade for Hop after June 1st if we cut Kirksey and pay same amount? Looks like Hopkins is not going anywhere, surprisingly.
It's kind of weird.
I think that they were trying to work something out with Baltimore, and then Baltimore said, nah, we'll go draft Flowers.
I could see that.
So he's due $19 million salary this year.
That's not going to happen. Like,
yeah, you would have to expect Arizona to eat a good chunk of that. And they've got plenty of cap space. So, if you could get them to eat 10, 11 million of that and bring him over at 8 or 9, we'll say they 8, 10, 4. So he comes over at 9 million flat. And then Houston. And then if you release Kirksey's 5.25 savings. So you're still going to come out backwards around 4. So, I mean, the team could make it work. They're already a little tied up on the cap, but they could make it work. After June 1st would be beneficial for Arizona, just for prorating out and spreading out the prorated money over 2 years for Arizona. So they could make it work. I just don't foresee that being much of an option for Houston. I think it sounds like Hopkins has kind of wore out his welcome in Arizona. And I think the path and the culture and the locker room that they're trying to build in Houston, bringing in Will Anderson and some of the other players, I really just don't know that absent his
this is never going to happen.
Absent his performance off the field, I just don't know that that's a player you want in this locker room at this point.
And if I was DeAndre Hopkins, I'd want to go to a team that's a contender this season.
Yeah.
You're 31. You played on a lot of different teams. You played in the playoffs a number of times. I'd want to go to a team, Buffalo, Kansas City. I'm just kind of naming teams that have needs where I can win a Super Bowl this season.
I think
that is not here.
I think Arizona probably said, let's just table this for now. Come play, put on your show, and then we'll start floating your name out there around trade deadline time.
Oh, that could work. Depending on the quarterback situation, that may not impact him. But if he gets, I think there's a lot of uncertainty with Hopkins right now as far as what kind of player he still is. Mm-hmm. So if he gets off to a nice start this season, with the desperation that contenders are going to have, I can imagine his value being decently high, let's say in mid-October. So that might be a decent course of action for Arizona.
Yeah, I think you could get a second for him if you find somebody desperate enough, or maybe a team that's playing well that incurs an injury, or is just looking for that final piece to get them through into the playoffs. So, I would definitely think that that's an option for Arizona. Validate, great UDF pickup. I think we're all excited. I mean, I've always said, and Nick's always signed very small undrafted classes, especially the last 2 years, and COVID had a role of that 2 years ago. But I always wanted to just sign a really, really young, juiced up running back as an undrafted and just really bring him in and have some competition and we'll see if it works. This is one that, and I wanted to get your take on this, Mike, and I also wanted to get your take on Aaron Rodgers, because I know you follow the Jets pretty hard. So it seems like the Jets wide receiver room might be a little crowded now. And Mims doesn't really intrigue me at all. Especially coming from Baylor and that whole system, but Corey Davis does have a little bit of intrigue for me. How do you see that wide receiver room playing out?
I think the Jets, it seems like, are going to keep Corey Davis, at least as of now. That was thought to be, hey, he's going to be released at some point. I guess that's not going to happen. But if you're asking me if he was out there, yeah, if I'm the Texans, I would for sure be interested. Size, blocking ability, that's the kind of player that you'd want because he's better than a lot of guys they have. Mims would be sort of a different category where you'd be betting on his talent, upside, being able to teach him the receiver position. I'd be willing to take a flyer on somebody like that, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. Corey Davis is the kind of guy that if he was out there, I'd prefer him on this team because he would just represent an upgrade. Like he could be better than Robert Woods. I'm not entirely sure, but he could be a starting receiver in the NFL. Could be.
Yeah. Lyle Collins, no thank you. No interest in that whatsoever. I'm not even sure where he would fit on this roster. I think he's kind of really starting to fall off quite a bit this year. Who do y'all want early in the season? Colts or the Titans?
I'd say probably Indy, depending on if they start Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. It seems like Irsay wants him out there week 1 and maybe not Minshew, but I'm ready to play the Colts because I really want to see Richardson. He was definitely the most polarizing, kind of intriguing draft prospect with the wide range of outcomes with him. So I'm really interested to see if he ends up becoming a more annoying quarterback to play against or somebody we look forward to playing against. We'll have to just wait and see, but that's going to be an interesting tie up with him and Steichen and having maybe some similarities coaching up Jalen Hurts and then carrying that over to Shane, carrying it over with Andy Richardson. Titans, I don't know. I mean, Titans, they're obviously going backwards.
What?
It's going to be.
I
don't know how long Tannehill's going to be quarterbacking up there, and it's when you draft a quarterback like that, and you have a quarterback like Tannehill in the last year of his contract, and a team starts losing. Say Tennessee is 2-5 after 7 weeks. They're going to be clamoring for Levis, and I don't know what kind of plan Tennessee is going to put together, if they're just going to say, no way Levis sees the field this year unless there's an injury. But that gets really, really dicey when you have that type of quarterback situation.
Seemed like the Titans fans were just none too pleased with their draft. People are just not happy with Ran Carthon. It sounds like he had a fairly uninspiring news conference on Friday when they picked Levis. And it's interesting because they wanted to trade up and draft Stroud. That didn't happen. And what's interesting when you think about Tennessee's fan base is it's in Nashville. So it's one of these cities where there are a lot of people who watch SEC football. And I think part of the reason why they're so down on Levis is because a lot of those fans are SEC fans and they saw him struggle last year at Kentucky. There might be people who like Hendon Hooker over him. So I think that kind of factors in. But they're just kind of like, this is what I compared it to when I was on the air on Saturday. It's not an exact comparison because the position is valuable, but what the Titans cap have done a quarterback kind of reminds me of you ever walk into a grocery store or even go on Amazon and you're like, I wasn't necessarily looking for pork chops that were 75% off, but now that you present them to me, the sell-by date might be in 3 hours, but I don't know if I can pass on that deal. Or you go on Amazon and you're like, all right, this kitchen cutlery set is 83% off. And I'm looking at my kitchen and I think I have enough cutlery or whatever. But, at this price, this seems like a hell of a deal. So I use that analogy to say they're sitting there in round 3 last year and it's like, hey, Malik Willis is around. This seems like pretty fair value. Let's give this a shot. And then, he goes through a very tumultuous rookie season where I guess the feel is that he just doesn't know the playbook at all, or he's not adjusting to it, whatever. And then, last week it's like, hey, I know they traded up for Will Levis, so the analogy may not be exact, but it's like, hey, Will Levis is available, and we wanted CJ Stroud. We couldn't get him. We want to move on from Tannehill eventually. Getting a talent like Levis in the second round, boy, I didn't think that would be a possibility. Let's go with this. Yeah. So that to me, like, the Titans have made investments at quarterback, but it almost seems like it's happening to them as opposed to them proactively doing it, is how I feel.
Yeah. So your BCB, what's going on with Titus Howard? When's he going to be extended? I think you need to see more of Titus Howard, just a little bit more. Maybe he's an in-season, mid-season kind of extension candidate. I think, last year was the first year he's made it through a full season, stayed at one position. I think you just need to see a little bit more, make sure it's still there, make sure he's a fit in this zone scheme. That would be my one concern for him, to see if he's a fit in this scheme or not, and then how he works with Shaq Mason. So that would be my take on that. Rowe said he sent a question on Twitter DM. So he had asked thoughts on a Clowney 1-year deal to get some experience on run defense.
Again, I just think, like, the Hopkins thing, I think going back to the well there is probably not something that's going to happen organizationally.
I'm not opposed to bringing in an edge veteran. I mean, you've already got Jerry Hughes and then, of course, Grenard, who can never stay healthy. And it's who else did they have on end? Let's see here. Where's my depth chart? It's a
Chase Winovich, Horton.
Yeah, Chase Winovich.
Eric Rivers.
I can't believe they re-signed him. It's Jack Easterby's boy. That's Jack Easterby's boy.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Delier.
Yeah, he's an international player, and then it's Damone Harris. So yeah, they probably do need to look at an edge guy. You start looking at who's available. Anybody that's under 30, it's a pretty small group. Yannick Ngakoue is 28, but he's a pretty light in the back end. So generally, especially if you look at San Francisco, most of their defensive ends are 260 plus. But there's some players like Dwayne Smoot, who was with Jacksonville last year. Melvin Ingram, he's 34. Gets pretty. Trey Flowers, he's 30. Jason Pierre-Paul, 34. A lot of these guys are old. Carl Nassib at 30.
Trey Flowers is only 30.
Yeah. But these are guys that you get through a week, 3 weeks of training camp, and you realize, we need some help. And then so you start hitting up because of Clowney and those kind of guys. I mean, Clowney doesn't want to even come to training camp anyway. He wants to show up on preseason and go play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't, certainly not opposed to another edge player. I think they probably will find an edge player at some point. Just need to see what they have and the guys that they have right now. Mike, you doing okay?
Angelo Blackson.
Goodness gracious. Are you more excited to watch our offense or defense next year, which will be better? So we kind of touched on that earlier, but I think at the end of the day, I'm excited for both. But
it's got to be offense for me.
I mean, we've seen such putrid offense here the past 2 years.
Yes.
With, especially with what happened last year. I'm just ready to see a functioning offense. That's really all I want. And I'm excited to see it. And we haven't seen the zone scheme around here in quite some time. And if you've been watching the team for a while, then you should have some pretty good memories of watching Arian Foster. And I'm certainly not expecting Dameon Pierce or anybody on this roster to present that type of performance. But, we've seen what a zone scheme can do. And, I secretly, if he can stay healthy, I secretly have big aspirations for Nico Collins. I think the X wide receiver in this position, in this offense, has the opportunity to really put together big yards, big reception numbers. It's just all going to be on him remaining.
Yeah, he's got to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Yes.
but I think there's a chance for him. And then prime or truth. I mean, primetime games, I would say probably just one. And it's going to be like a Thursday. It's going to be a Thursday night game if that even is considered a primetime game. But I think Houston's going to have to earn that right to get those kind of games. So
yes, I could see. I'm curious if week 1 is going to be
maybe a Monday nighter.
I don't know about that. I would say week 1. I wonder if that's going to be at Carolina, matchup number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
Curious if they do it that way. And one of the things about the I meant to mention this with the schedule and the win-loss record is it's really hard for me to get a gauge on win-loss record until I see the schedule, because I do think there's a tangible difference as far as it's not about just who you play, but it's when you play them. Now, a lot of that's determined during the season, injuries, all of it. But, there are certain teams I look at on the schedule and I say to myself, I might prefer to face them early in the season as opposed to later in the season. So that kind of factors in. I like to look at it to see.
Yeah. Because they've got
and also losing can kind of feed on itself. Like if you have a really tough opening stretch, that could lead to more of a losing record than vice versa. So I kind of want to see that in probably a week or two whenever the schedule gets released.
Yeah, because they've got the AFC North and the NFC South, and then the 2 carryovers are AFC West and NFC West. So only 8 home games this year. They're on the opposite side of the 17 gamer, but yeah. So we'll see. They were talking. There was a leak, or Schefter said maybe May 11th they might get the schedule out. So
all right, so a week and a day.
Yeah, maybe so. That's really all about. Yeah, STX right there with me on Nico. If he can stay healthy, that's my one surprise player that I think can really do some damage if he can stay healthy. So, that's an hour and 12 minutes, Mike.
Yes,
I appreciate it, sir. As always,
I enjoyed it. I had a challenging day today, so I enjoyed this a lot.
You excited for Aaron Rodgers?
I am cautiously optimistic, but very emphasis on cautious. We shall see.
AFC all of a sudden didn't take
very
long.
Tough.
Now all of a sudden the AFC is a loaded quarterback side. It was the NFC for a little while, and then things have massively flipped over. So Houston's got a tough road ahead, but we're excited for them. So this concludes the off-season portion of the Cap and Trade series. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to probably take a little break. Been blowing and going here since September, so ready to take a little bit of break, and then we'll figure out. I'll probably do a little more writing than streaming. But you can catch Mike on Twitter as always at Mike Meltser. And where are you at now? Sirius XM Mad Dog Radio?
Yes, Mad Dog Radio channel 82. I will be on this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, actually, double dip. So I'll be on 10 to 2 on Saturday and 10 to 2 on Sunday as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that will be it for us. And I wish everybody has a good evening. And with that, we will shut it down. Have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.